In an era where your every click leaves a digital trail that could unravel your life, what if the infamous Professor Moriarty wasn't mere fiction, but inspired by a real criminal mastermind? Adam Worth, the Victorian crime boss who pulled off heists that confounded empires, stole not just fortunes but a priceless masterpiece that vanished for decades. But how did a poor immigrant boy rise to become the Napoleon of crime, who frustrated the Pinkerton detective agency across continents? By candlelight in 1844 Germany, a Jewish tailor's family struggled against poverty. Young Adam, born perhaps as Worth or Wirtz, the records are unclear, first opened his eyes in that cramped room where his father bent over his work, stitching dreams into seams that barely held together. Even as a child, Adam's gaze lingered on metal tools. His small hands reached not just for food but were drawn to the thrill of taking things. In one telling moment, unobserved by his weary parents, he slipped a neighbor's crust of bread into his pocket, not from hunger alone, but from curiosity about the act itself. This subtle moment revealed a mind already fascinated by the mechanics of taking what wasn't his. When Adam was 5, the family crossed the Atlantic to Cambridge, Massachusetts, where his father found work in the bustling immigrant community. The streets hummed with the noise of factories and distant opportunities, but Adam absorbed more than his parents intended. He watched the contrast between his father's honest work and the shadowy dealings in alleyways, men exchanging whispers for coins, their respectable faces hiding darker business. This early exposure planted seeds of ambition that would later twist into something far more dangerous. At 14, Adam cut ties with home and ran away to New York City's labyrinthine streets, carrying only a thimble stolen from his father's sewing kit. The city swallowed him whole, and in its underworld of pickpockets and street thieves, a grizzled mentor took him under wing. The boy had eyes like a hawk, saw pockets before owners did, the old thief might have said. Dressed in rags that mimicked respectability, Adam honed his skills, lifting wallets with surprising finesse. For him, theft wasn't about malice, it was an intellectual challenge, a game where the stakes grew with each successful score. When the American Civil War erupted, Adam discovered bounty jumping, a wartime scam where men enlisted for cash bonuses, then deserted and repeated the cycle under false names. Union armies were desperate for soldiers and offered hefty sums, sometimes hundreds of dollars per enlistment. Adam saw not the horror of battlefields, but a mechanical process of profit. He enlisted, pocketed the bounty, then vanished into chaos, faking deaths or slipping away under the cover of battle. A fellow jumper observed Adam's unusual calm. His fingers traced maps, not for military strategy, but for escape routes. In one muddy field where cannon fire thundered and men fell, Adam feigned a fatal wound with theatrical precision, rolling into a ditch while his heart pounded with exhilaration rather than fear. Why spill blood when wits work better, he might have thought. This wartime deception fueled his rise while leaving a trail of betrayed trust. Recruiters defrauded, regiments weakened. From wartime scams, Adam graduated to organized crime in New York's gang-controlled neighborhoods. He orchestrated his first real heist, a modest safe in a dimly lit warehouse, cracked not with force but with precision. When he distributed shares among his crew with calm fairness, he displayed a loyalty that would later span oceans and enable international operations. But consider the victim, a humble bank clerk whose life savings vanished overnight, his family plunged into poverty. Adam Worth, the criminal mastermind, was emerging, a quiet figure who found satisfaction in puzzles solved and challenges conquered. Faking his own death became Adam's signature move. In smoke-filled backrooms of post-war America, he staged fatal accidents, perhaps a contrived brawl or sudden illness, then emerged reborn under new identities, much like today's digital personas. He even mourned his own death in private moments, perhaps feeling the cost of constant reinvention. Bank robberies followed across the United States, vaults yielding to his touch without a shot fired. His refusal to use violence frustrated early pursuers. A Pinkerton agent wrote, "He slips through like smoke," capturing law enforcement's growing frustration with this phantom in a top hat. Yet behind his respectable appearance during heists, suits tailored to perfection hiding burglary tools, victims suffered, families bankrupted, communities left distrustful. Adam's operations expanded to South Africa's diamond fields, where amid dusty mines and merciless heat, he orchestrated thefts of glittering stones. He admired their beauty not just for monetary value, a psychological trait that would later drive greater obsessions. While he pocketed gems with dancer-like grace, exploited miners broke their backs for others' gain. Pinkerton reports painted a network spanning continents. No violence, yet ruin follows, one agent noted. The damage mounted, defrauded merchants, shattered lives, crimes that multiplied like echoes. With his fortune secured, Adam set his sights on London, infiltrating high society with the ease of fog rolling over the Thames. His dapper persona was the perfect mask, top hats and polished boots concealing his criminal core. A real-life Professor Moriarty was taking shape in the mist-shrouded streets. As Worth eyes a Gainsborough auction, a Pinkerton wire warns of his presence. Will the Duchess fall into his grasp? What drives a man to steal beauty itself? The theft that shook an empire awaits in our next chapter. London fog hung heavy over Christie's auction house in May 1876. Inside, Victorian high society clustered around a rediscovered masterpiece, Thomas Gainsborough's portrait of Georgiana, Duchess of Devonshire. Her ethereal gaze had just fetched £10,500, the highest price ever paid for a painting at auction, equivalent to a king's ransom in those days. The bidding war had been fierce, each hammer fall echoing through the art world. The Duchess herself had lived a scandalous life in the 18th century, enmeshed in political intrigue, plagued by gambling debts, and entangled in personal affairs that shocked Georgian society. Now her image was commodified, yet still captivating. Amid the crowd of wealthy bidders, Adam Worth watched in disguise, his eyes lingering on the Duchess's painted face. Here was beauty made eternal, and he wanted it for himself. At midnight in his rented chamber, Worth huddled over blueprints with two accomplices. The contrast was striking, his gentleman's attire hiding burglary tools, a dapper criminal planning an ungentlemanly deed. His associates were rough men of brute force, but Worth's approach was different. No blood, only shadows, he whispered. His code remained non-violent, even in crime's darkest corners. The victim was already chosen. Art dealer William Agnew had just purchased the Duchess, triumphant in his acquisition. He had no idea what was coming, not just financial loss, but professional humiliation that would echo through the art world. Worth studied the gallery's layout with the precision of an artist, his mind mapping every entrance and every weakness. On May 27, 1876, at the stroke of midnight, Worth made his move. He scaled the gallery wall with athletic grace, while his accomplices kept watch below. Using a diamond-tipped tool, a memento from his South African operations, he cut through the window glass of Thomas Agnew and Sons. Inside, the Duchess waited. But this wasn't theft for profit. Worth rolled the canvas carefully, tucking it into a custom tube with the tenderness of a lover. He wasn't stealing to sell, he was claiming beauty for himself, a possessive act that would deprive the public of this masterpiece for 25 years. The theft was so clean and precise that when Scotland Yard inspectors arrived, they found no forced doors, no shattered glass, except for one surgical incision. The painting had simply vanished. The aftermath sent shockwaves through London's art world. Agnew's humiliation rippled outward. Confidence shattered, the theft forcing galleries to rethink security entirely. Meanwhile, Worth had disappeared again, and the Duchess was tucked safely away. He treated the rolled canvas like a sacred relic, checking on it in private moments with an obsession that bordered on romance. With the Duchess secured, Worth's international operations expanded like a web across continents. He coordinated from luxurious hideouts, orchestrating bank jobs in America, diamond thefts in Africa, and fraud rings across Europe. His loyalty to associates enabled countless escapes, a trait that kept his network intact but facilitated wave after wave of crime. The damage was enormous. Widows were swindled out of their inheritances. Merchants went bankrupt. Families lost everything to Worth's elaborate confidence schemes, where he posed as nobility and charmed victims with practiced ease. He was pioneering what we'd now call social engineering, false identities crafted like digital avatars, designed to inspire trust before betrayal. The Pinkerton Detective Agency was growing desperate. William Pinkerton's agents chased Worth's shadow across oceans, always one step behind. Their frustration mounted with each failed arrest. A near miss in Paris typified their struggles. Detectives burst into a safe house only to find echoes, Worth having vanished, through another prepared escape route. His operational security was fortress-like, utilizing false identities, bribing officials, and maintaining safe houses scattered across continents. Worth aided his friends' escapes with the same careful planning he used for heists, displaying a code of honor that made him nearly impossible to betray. Yet this gentlemanly criminal was making a mockery of international law enforcement, evading capture without ever drawing a weapon. His confidence schemes grew more elaborate. Worth posed as foreign nobility, swindling elite society with charm and fabricated credentials. These weren't random muggings, they were carefully orchestrated psychological manipulations that prefigured modern identity theft. One banker lost his life savings. A widow was left destitute. Each successful fraud emboldened Worth while destroying lives. The pattern traced back to his Civil War bounty jumping. That early realization that deception could be more profitable than honest work. War had taught him that chaos created opportunity, and human nature was predictable enough to exploit systematically. Worth's wealth bought him time and safety. Safe houses dotted his escape routes like hidden treasures. Identities shifted with the ease of changing clothes. But even empires eventually crumble, and the net was slowly tightening. The scope of his network was staggering. Art thefts, diamond heists, elaborate frauds, crimes that remain unsolved to this day. Each success facilitated the next, creating a criminal empire that spanned continents and touched countless lives. In quiet moments, Worth would unroll the Duchess's portrait and study her painted eyes. There was something deeply personal in his attachment to this stolen beauty, a vulnerability that contrasted sharply with the chaos he orchestrated worldwide. Meanwhile, police coordination struggled with the limits of 19th-century communication. How long could one man mock justice? His non-violent approach somehow made him even more frustrating. Here was a criminal who left financial ruin but never bloodshed, confounding authorities who were used to more straightforward villains. But even the most careful criminals leave traces. As Pinkerton agents close in on a crucial lead, Worth receives word of a potential betrayal within his own ranks. Could his code of honor finally fracture his empire? What happens when trust becomes a liability in a world built on deception? As the 19th century drew to a close, Adam Worth's empire began to crumble. Age and miscalculation took their toll on his once unassailable network. Lavish hideouts were abandoned, allies scattered, and his body grew weary from decades of constant evasion. The man who had once snatched the Duchess's portrait in youthful audacity now faced the harsh reality of prison bars. Even behind bars, Worth's loyalty remained unshaken. He protected his associates from harsher sentences, shielding them with the same code of honor that had built his empire. But his intellectual pride refused to bend, even in confinement. The Napoleon of Crime had been reduced to a prison number, though his non-violent approach had at least spared him the gallows. When Worth was finally released, he returned to England and settled into a quiet life with his 2 children. The transformation was remarkable. The globe-trotting master thief had become a doting father. He tucked his children into bed with stories scrubbed clean of his criminal past, showing a tenderness that seemed impossible from the man who had orchestrated international heists. Yet the Duchess's portrait remained hidden in his possession, one last secret from a life of shadows. Perhaps the strangest chapter in Worth's story was his unlikely relationship with William Pinkerton, the head of the detective agency that had hunted him for decades. Their meetings took place in neutral territory, hunter and prey becoming unlikely conversationalists. "We both play the game but with different rules," Worth might have said during one of these encounters. Years of frustration had given way to mutual respect, the pursuer and the pursued finding common ground in their shared understanding of the chase. This relationship frustrated other law enforcement officials. How could justice be served through gentlemen's agreements? Yet Pinkerton understood something others missed. Sometimes pragmatism achieved what force could not. In 1901, nearly 25 years after the theft, Worth finally agreed to return the Gainsborough portrait. The negotiation was delicate, not driven by profit, but by Worth's growing concern for his legacy. Through Pinkerton's channels, the Duchess emerged from her long captivity, creased, but enduring. The transaction bypassed formal arrest, a testament to both Pinkerton's pragmatic approach and Worth's unique position in the criminal underworld. The art world rejoiced, but the damage was already done. A generation had been deprived of seeing this masterpiece. Galleries had fortified themselves with new security measures, alarms, guards, and protocols born directly from Worth's audacious theft. The cultural impact couldn't be undone, even with the painting's return. Worth's final years were marked by quiet decline. Private letters hinted at regrets, though he never fully acknowledged the scope of damage his career had caused. His loyalty to his children became his sole anchor, a final act of love in a life that had caused so much pain to others. The dapper figure who had once commanded international criminal networks faded, like ink on aged paper. When Adam Worth died peacefully on January 8, 1902, his passing was a whisper rather than a roar, yet his legacy was already secure in ways he might not have anticipated. Arthur Conan Doyle had been drawing from Worth's archetype in creating Professor Moriarty, the cerebral, well-dressed villain with his own twisted code of ethics. Worth had become the template for fictional criminal masterminds, his influence extending far beyond his actual crimes. The parallels to our digital age are unsettling. Worth's identity manipulation and global networks prefigure today's cybercriminals, who orchestrate fraud from behind screens, their respectability masking devastating crimes. His social engineering techniques, the false identities, the carefully crafted personas, mirror modern identity theft on a massive scale. But we shouldn't romanticize Worth's story. Behind his gentlemanly facade lay genuine suffering. Families bankrupted, lives destroyed, cultural treasures held hostage by one man's ego. His non-violent approach may have spared blood, but it didn't spare pain. The art dealer William Agnew's professional humiliation, the countless fraud victims left destitute, the public deprived of the Duchess's beauty for a quarter century. These costs were real and lasting. Worth's psychological profile reveals a man driven by intellectual challenge and artistic obsession, bound by a moral code that permitted theft but not violence. His sophisticated social skills allowed him to forge unlikely alliances, even with the detective hunting him, while his operational genius kept him one step ahead of international law enforcement for decades. The question remains: what price should society pay for one man's obsession? The Duchess's painted gaze seems to ask this question across the centuries. A silent accusation against beauty imprisoned and trust betrayed. Worth's story connects to other unsolved mysteries of his era: diamond thefts in Africa, art thefts across Europe, and the remnants of criminal networks that may have outlived their creators. These threads suggest that his influence extended far beyond his documented crimes, leaving puzzles that remain unsolved to this day. The man who inspired literature's greatest criminal mastermind died as he had lived in his final years, quietly, without fanfare. But Adam Worth's shadow stretches across more than a century, a reminder that criminal genius, however refined, comes at a cost that victims pay long after the perpetrator has faded into history.